Right now, as you watch this video, one of the most important waterways on the entire planet is effectively closed. Ships that were carrying oil to fuel factories, power stations, and petrol stations across the world have stopped moving. Tankers are sitting anchored outside a narrow stretch of water, unable to move forward, their crews waiting and watching. Oil prices are surging, governments are panicking, and economists are warning that if this situation continues, it could trigger the worst global energy crisis in half a century. All of this because of a strip of water just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. This is the Strait of Hormuz. And today, we are going to explain exactly why this tiny waterway has the power to shake the entire global economy to its core. Before we explain what the Strait of Hormuz is, let us start with a number that puts everything into perspective. Every single day, approximately 20 million barrels of oil pass through this narrow channel. 20 million barrels every day. That represents roughly 20% of the entire world's daily oil supply. And it is not just oil. Around 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas exports also pass through this same channel, primarily from Qatar, the world's second-largest LNG exporter. To put that into even clearer perspective, if you took every oil tanker currently blocked from passing through the Strait of Hormuz and lined them up end to end, the line would stretch for hundreds of kilometers. This is not a regional energy problem. This is a global economic emergency hiding inside a geography lesson. So what exactly is the Strait of Hormuz, and where is it? Picture the Persian Gulf as a giant lake of oil. Surrounding it are some of the world's most oil-rich nations: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Together, these countries sit on an extraordinary share of the world's proven oil reserves. But here's the problem. This giant lake of oil has only one exit, one narrow opening that connects the Persian Gulf to the wider ocean, and from there to the rest of the world. That exit is the Strait of Hormuz. It sits between Iran to the north and Oman to the south. At its narrowest point, it is just 21 miles wide. And the actual shipping lanes are even tighter. 2 lanes of traffic, each just 2 miles wide, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. That's it. That is the exit point for roughly a fifth of the world's entire oil supply. Through 2 lanes, each the width of a small town. Now here's where it gets truly alarming. The countries that depend most heavily on oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz are not small, developing nations. They are some of the world's largest and most powerful economies. China receives 37.7% of all the oil that passes through the strait. It is the world's largest crude oil importer and purchases enormous quantities from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran. India receives nearly 15% of Hormuz oil flows, with around 60% of its total oil imports coming from the Middle East. Japan, which imports almost all of its crude oil, receives nearly 11% of Hormuz flows. And South Korea, one of the world's most energy import-dependent economies, receives nearly 12%. Together, China, India, Japan, and South Korea account for nearly 70% of all oil passing through the strait. These 4 countries alone represent an enormous share of global manufacturing, technology production, and economic output. When their energy supply is threatened, the entire global economy feels it. So what actually happens to oil prices when the strait is disrupted? The answer is they explode. When the current crisis began in late February 2026, oil prices jumped immediately from around $71 per barrel to $77 within a single day. As the situation escalated, prices broke through $90 per barrel. And analysts are now warning that a prolonged closure could push oil to $100, $150, or even $200 per barrel. Iran's own military commanders have publicly stated, expect oil at $200 per barrel.
But what does $200 oil actually mean for ordinary people around the world? When oil prices double, petrol prices at the pump follow. But it doesn't stop there. Almost everything you buy, food, clothing, electronics, furniture, requires oil somewhere in its production or transportation chain. Farmers use oil to power tractors and produce fertilizers. Trucks use oil to deliver food to supermarkets. Factories use oil to power production lines. A sustained doubling of oil prices doesn't just make driving more expensive, it raises the cost of almost everything you consume. And for countries that import most of their energy, like Japan, South Korea, India, and most of Europe, the economic damage can be severe and long-lasting. At this point, you might be asking, surely the world has backup plans. Can the oil not just take a different route? The honest answer is yes, partially, but nowhere near enough. Saudi Arabia operates a major pipeline called the East-West Pipeline that can carry oil from its eastern oil fields all the way across the country to the Red Sea port of Yanbu, bypassing the strait entirely. The UAE operates a similar pipeline to the port of Fujairah on the Arabian Sea. Together, these pipelines can theoretically move around 9 million barrels per day away from the strait. But remember, 20 million barrels per day normally flow through the strait. Even if all alternative pipelines operate at maximum capacity, there is still a shortfall of approximately 12 million barrels per day that has no alternative route. And there are further complications. The Red Sea route via Saudi Arabia's pipeline is itself vulnerable to attack from other regional actors. Several drone strikes have already targeted alternative port facilities. And for Qatar's liquefied natural gas, there is simply no alternative route at all. Every single LNG cargo Qatar exports must pass through the strait. No pipeline, no bypass, no plan B. When oil and gas stop flowing through the strait, the economic pain is not distributed equally around the world. Some countries are devastated, others barely feel it, and a few actually benefit. The most vulnerable are the energy import-dependent economies of Asia. Japan and South Korea each hold about 2 to 4 weeks of LNG reserves. If the strait stays closed beyond that window, they face genuine energy shortages, power cuts, factory shutdowns, economic slowdowns. South India faces an even acute crisis. Qatar and the UAE account for 99% of Pakistan's LNG imports and 72% of Bangladesh's. Pakistan and Bangladesh are already running significant energy deficits even in normal times. A prolonged strait closure could trigger electricity blackouts lasting days and cripple their industrial output. India, the world's most populous country and one of its fastest-growing economies, sources around 60% of its oil imports from the Middle East. A sustained doubling of oil prices would dramatically increase its energy import bill, weaken its currency, and push inflation higher for hundreds of millions of people. Europe, while less directly dependent than Asia, has seen its Gulf energy reliance grow in recent years, and the entire global LNG market would tighten severely, pushing gas prices higher for consumers from Germany to South Korea. But here's the part of the story that rarely gets discussed. Not everyone loses when the strait is disrupted. Some countries and economies actually benefit significantly from higher oil prices. The United States, which has become one of the world's largest oil producers thanks to its shale oil revolution, earns more revenue when oil is high. American oil companies become dramatically more profitable. Countries like Nigeria, Angola, and other African oil exporters suddenly find their oil worth far more on global markets, boosting their government revenues. Norway, Canada, and other non-Gulf oil producers all benefit from the price surge. And interestingly, Russia, despite facing its own economic pressures, earns more from the oil it manages to export when global prices spike. This is one of the uncomfortable realities of global energy economics. A crisis in one part of the world creates winners and losers simultaneously. and the winners rarely have much incentive to rush towards a solution. This is not the first time the world has faced an energy crisis triggered by Middle Eastern instability. In 1973, OPEC triggered an oil embargo against Western nations that caused oil prices to quadruple almost overnight. Petrol stations ran dry, governments introduced rationing, economic growth collapsed across the developed world. In the United States, drivers queued for hours to fill their tanks. In the United Kingdom, the government introduced a 3-day working week to conserve energy. The 1973 oil shock triggered a global recession that lasted years. Then, in the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, both sides attacked oil tankers passing through the Persian Gulf in what became known as the Tanker War. The United States eventually deployed its navy to escort tankers through the region. Global oil markets were disrupted for years.
Each time the world has faced an energy shock of this magnitude, the economic consequences have been severe, long-lasting, and felt far beyond the countries directly involved in the conflict. So what does the Strait of Hormuz crisis teach us about the global economy? The first lesson is about concentration risk. When 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through a single 21-mile channel, the world has created an extraordinary vulnerability. Decades of economic growth and globalization have been built on the assumption that this channel will always remain open. The second lesson is about energy dependence. Countries that have failed to diversify their energy sources and invest in renewables, nuclear power, and domestic production find themselves uniquely vulnerable when global energy markets are disrupted. The third lesson is about the real price of cheap energy. For decades, the world has enjoyed relatively cheap oil because of the efficient but fragile system that funnels Gulf oil through the Strait of Hormuz. The hidden cost of that cheap oil is geopolitical risk, the constant possibility that instability in one small region can send shockwaves through every economy on Earth. And the fourth lesson is that in a globalized world, no economy is truly isolated from events happening thousands of miles away. Whether you live in Tokyo, Lagos, London, or New York, the Strait of Hormuz affects the price of the food you eat, the fuel in your car, and the electricity powering your home. And there you have it, the story of why a 21-mile stretch of water between Iran and Oman has the power to shake the entire global economy. A reminder that in our deeply interconnected world, geography still matters enormously, and that the most powerful economic forces on Earth can sometimes be concentrated in the most unexpected places. If you found this video valuable, hit the like button and subscribe to Economic Savvy for more videos breaking down the world's most important and fascinating economic stories. See you in the next one.